What time is it?
Draw the curtains and expand your mind. It's time to get textual as we traverse the illicit pages of Wrongthink in the Forbidden Book Club.
Indeed. It's that time again. Time for the Forbidden Book Club. I must apologize. We didn't get to the Forbidden Book Club last week. I rambled on far too long, so I'm really trying to repair my ways and make sure we get to it this week, and we have. So we have some success already. The Forbidden Book Club, and today we're going to discuss this very, very interesting book, The New Order of Barbarians, the New World System. The New Order of Barbarians, the New World System. Now, as is my wont, I'm being a little bit cheeky this week. This is a book. Look, as you can see, it's a book. It's got pages and writing and bizarre and all that sort of stuff. But it did, I have to be transparent with you, the New Order of Barbarians did actually start out as a series of cassette tapes. They were recordings of interviews given by a gentleman by the name of Dr. Lawrence Dunnigan. The original cassette tapes were apparently recorded in the late 1980s, 1988, 1989, around there, I believe. I did first hear of them probably 15 to 18 years ago. So they have been around for a while. They have an interesting story. They've got, but now you can also get the transcripts as a book, The New Order of Barbarians. But there is, Ed, you can also find the tapes on the internet and listen to the original interviews as they were conducted. I think if you search for New Order of Barbarians, you may well find them, or New Order of Barbarians tape or something like this. But Ed, if you could bring up that address, maybe in the comments or something, if people want to listen to them as opposed to read the book. There you go. There's 3 tapes involved. They're interviews with a fellow called Dr. Lawrence Dunnigan. The backstory is extremely interesting. It's Dr. Lawrence Dunnigan recalling in the late 1980s a dinner and speech that he attended in 1969. I believe, if my memory is correct, it was March the 10th, 1969. He said that he attended this speech, which was, I'm also working from memory here, I think it was like the American Society of Pediatricians or something like that, one of these medical, peak body kind of things. I think it was the American Society of Pediatricians, to which Lawrence Dunnigan was a member. They were invited to a speech and dinner in Pittsburgh from memory. That is Dr. Lawrence Dunnigan there. That's what he looks like. He, on these interviews, he recorded that speech. The speech was given by a gentleman called Dr. Richard Day. Ed, you could bring up a photo of Dr. Richard Day as well. As always, you should ask questions, and people have asked questions about the veracity, the authenticity of these recordings, because they are strikingly prescient. But it's my view that they are genuine. That was Dr. Richard Day, the photo there. You can easily, as I did, find Dr. Richard Day's obituary in the New York Times. And that does it. I think we've got it there. There we go. New York Times obituary, Dr. Richard Day, ex-pediatrics professor. That obituary does mention that he was the director of Planned Parenthood in the US for a number of years in the mid-1960s, as Lawrence Dunnigan does describe him in the original tapes and in the book as well, the transcripts of those tapes. Now that's interesting. This is a very interesting backstory. Okay, Planned Parenthood. I don't want to get nuked here. It is what's called a large reproductive health organization in the US. The founder of Planned Parenthood was a woman called Margaret Singer, who was publicly and vocally connected and in favor of the eugenics movement. If you don't know the term eugenics means the breeding out of the less desirable elements of a species, in this case, the human species. So the founder of Planned Parenthood was vocally and publicly aligned with the eugenics movement. Dr. Richard Day was a director of Planned Parenthood in the 1960s. As also, there's an interesting connection there as well. Billy Gates, who you saw singing that charming little song from Willy Wonka back there a few moments ago, his father, William Gates, was also on the board of Planned Parenthood. Some people have drawn the bow that might suggest that Bill Gates's father also had an interest in eugenics, that he may possibly have passed on to his son, Bill Gates. That is speculation, of course, but it is speculation that many people have engaged in. Anyway, Dr. Richard Day, who gave this speech in Pittsburgh on the 10th of March, I believe, 1969, which is outlined in this book and on the tapes. I really do recommend you track them down. But Dr. Richard Day, March 20th, 1969, it was, in fact, he made, well, you could call them predictions, but they weren't, that's not really the most accurate word that you could use. He came into this speech, according to Lawrence Dunnigan, and said, well, the first thing he said is that he insisted that nobody have a tape recorder or take notes of what he was going to say. This was, he was delivering it to a room of 80 to 100 pediatricians and high-level surgeons and doctors, but he said he had to insist that nobody record his remarks in any way, and he was giving his remarks to give them fair warning of what the future held for our society. And I'm going to give you a few quotes and a few remarks from what he said. One of the first things he said, Dr. Richard Day, he said, we, the group that he represented, we plan to enter the 21st century with a running start. Everything is in place and nobody can stop us now. And these are all quotes, supposedly from Dr. Richard Day. What I'm talking about is much, much bigger than communism. He was talking about a new world system, a new world order, if you will. Dr. Richard Day said that he was an insider into, but not a high-level insider, a mid to low-level insider, and he had been briefed and brought up to speed with this plan that he said in 1969 was up and running and was unstoppable even at that stage, and that they planned to enter the 21st century with a running start. And he discussed that there was a plan of action to introduce a new world system onto the population without their permission, of course, without their initiative and without even their knowledge. And that as a medium to high level doctor in the US, he was privy to this plan, and he felt that he should forewarn his peers and colleagues who were attending this dinner. And Dr. Lawrence Dunnigan, who was present at that dinner, was a little shocked by these remarks. So he wrote many of them down. And then 20 years later, he gave these interviews, which were recorded on tape and are known as the New Order of Barbarians. He said that people will have to get used to change, that change will accelerate, and that there will be future shocks, and that people will not be able to deal with the amount of change, and that is deliberate. That is to sort of put them off balance. He also remarked, with apparently a faint air of melancholy, that people are simply too trusting and people do not ask the right questions, and that if they weren't so trusting and if they did ask the right questions, then this may not come to pass. But he saw it as inevitable that this new world system would come to pass. And he noted, and I'm quoting here, that everything has two purposes. One is the ostensible purpose, and the purpose that is the purpose given to the public, the reason for changes or developments or scenarios. One ostensible reason is the reason given to the public, and the other true purpose, which is hidden from the public, is the purpose that would further the goals of establishing the New World System. Now, one of the goals of this New World System was most definitely population control. And they meant it in both meanings, both potential meanings of that term, as in population control, as in controlling or indeed lessening the number of people alive, but also those people who are alive, controlling them and controlling their thoughts and their actions and controlling their lives overall. So the number one aim of this New World System that Dr. Richard Day was privy to, apparently, was population control. Interestingly, from what I've just been remarking on before the Forbidden Book Club today, as I said, all of these things, I'm suggesting to you that they're all connected. Richard Day said that sex education in schools would be used as a tool of world government. He also said that people will be given permission and, in fact, encouraged to be homosexual. That would have a number of benefits to the world system, the most obvious of them being less people. He also said that part of the plan was to make it harder for families to stay together. And this, I would suggest, is a tactic that you would have seen used in the Soviet Union, for example, where families are sort of delegitimized. Their children are encouraged through the education system and through the media and other social actions. Children are encouraged to be wards of the state, to owe their allegiance to the state rather than to their own parents and families. And that Richard Day in this talk said it will be harder for families to stay together. You may, if you've read 1984, you may recall Winston Smith's neighbours in the apartment block include children who are who want to inform on people who aren't loyal enough to the state. And Richard Day also says that overall medicine will be much more tightly controlled, and that education would be restructured as a tool of indoctrination. That seems vaguely familiar, doesn't it? And he said that children will spend more time in schools, but they will learn less. And they will learn less because it will be designed to teach them less. It will be designed to teach them less skills and teach them more indoctrination and more propaganda. It's reminiscent of John Taylor Gatto, Dumbing Us Down, and his other books. And Richard Day also remarked that some books, and this is something that because I'm bookish, I noticed this always struck me. He said some books would just disappear from libraries. And I would say libraries also meaning just general circulation. And I would suggest that is absolutely the case. In fact, on this very program, the Forbidden Book Club, we have featured books which are marginal at best, and some of them have, in fact, been removed completely from circulation. Richard Day also remarked that they would encourage drug abuse to create a sort of law of the jungle atmosphere and to encourage the collapse of families and the social structure, that they would encourage drug abuse, and they would also encourage sex and violence through entertainment. I think if you're paying attention, that's probably not too surprising to you, but it's interesting that somebody was saying this in 1969, that entertainment and education would be used to attack the family and to promote drug abuse, sex and violence in society, to erode social structure. He also at one point, very presciently, I would suggest, discussed terrorism and said that terrorism would be used and created, in fact, so that people would relinquish control to the proper authorities. He's suggesting that terrorism would be used to gather more power and more controls for the state. And that terrorism was an excellent method to frighten people, make them more obedient, and thus give more power, more police power, more surveillance power, more social control to the state. I would suggest that we have lived through that era and that we have seen that happen in our own societies, very much so. I would have to also remark with a certain bitter irony that the so-called war on terror that we've all lived through, I've pointed out numerous times that as soon as everybody got locked in their houses and had to lose their jobs because of the flu, the international terrorism ceased almost immediately. That other phase of the operation started. It's almost like those two operations were run by the same people or the same groups of people. What do you know? So Dr. Richard Day in 1969 was saying that terrorism would be a very useful tool. It would be terrorism controlled or inspired by the state, and it would be used to rob people of their rights and to terrorize them and to get more control in the hands of the state, so forth and so on. Quite prescient for 1969, I would suggest. He also said that there would be increased surveillance to extraordinary levels, and he suggested the possibility of implanting chips in people or implanting technology into people to track and surveil them. And he also suggested that in the coming decades, you would see televisions that would spy on people. And I would suggest that the mobile, that's exactly what a mobile or cellular phone is. It's a television that spies on you. It's a tracking device that broadcasts media nonsense at you, and tracks and surveils you constantly at the same time. In 1969, Dr. Richard Day also said that private-owned housing would become a thing of the past. You will own nothing and you will be happy. Privately owned housing would become a thing of the past, and that costs and housing would be made so high that most people couldn't afford it. That seems to ring a bell with me. And that these sort of steps would be ushering in the arrival of a totalitarian global system. As I said, Dr. Richard Day, the fellow giving these remarks that were recorded by Dr. Lawrence Dunnigan, said that they planned, that this was their plan, to introduce a new world system, a new world order, that even in 1969, that planning was well underway, and that they would work busily on this through the approaching decades, and that they were planning to hit the ground running, his words, on the arrival of the 21st century. I would suggest to you that there is a momentous event at the beginning of the 21st century, in fact, on September 11, 2001, so just 9 months into the 21st century, that was a bold and calculated and planned step into this potential new world system that they were planning. That is this book. It does exist, as I said, as cassette tape recordings. You can hear yourself, Dr. Lawrence Dunnigan, recall this dinner that he was at in March 20th, 1969 in Pittsburgh. So you can find the tapes. The link was up there. Ed, maybe if you'd be so kind as to pull that link up again for the tapes, if you've got it accessible. You can always also get it as a book. I have it as a book as well. I've also listened to the tapes from start to finish. Thank you, Ed. There's one address where you can find transcriptions of those tapes and the tapes themselves. They were distributed from the late 1980s onwards by Christian groups in the US, Christian Liberty Church, and I think a few other groups did distribute them. I heard about them in the early 2000s, I guess. As far as I can discern, they are genuine. The people involved are genuine. As I said, we pulled up Dr. Richard Day's obituary before in the New York Times. That does include mention of the fact that he was a head of a director of Planned Parenthood, as described in the tapes and in the book. So as far as I can ascertain, they appear to be genuine, and I would suggest that, as I've given you a few brief excerpts today, there's much more in the book. I do recommend it to you. As I've said before, I would suggest this is perhaps evidence of the hypothesis that where we are right now is a project that has been at least decades in the offing. As I've said before, and I want to say it again, do not necessarily be disheartened by this information. You should, in fact, be armed. Information and awareness are useful things. Don't be disheartened by this information, because they are not, despite they've been working on these plans, these sick, degenerate people have been working on these plans for decades. That does not mean that they will succeed. And in fact, there are times when their measures seem fragile. There are times, the example I like to give is monkeypox. You know, they appear to want to bring out this absurd monkeypox narrative to replace the other previous absurd narrative. And the first thing I heard about this monkeypox nonsense was people sending me memes about it. I don't know, if you can pull up the one I'm talking about, but a couple of people sent me this hilarious meme. It was like an orangutan running through sort of like a park, chasing after a little kid on a tricycle, and the orangutan had written on its chest or wherever monkeypox, and the little kid, who looked terrified and was running away from this big orangutan thing on the tricycle, had written on the child, the 11 people who still believe the media. And monkeypox was so easy to meme about and to laugh about. It was so patently absurd that I believe that is the reason why their narrative collapsed. It was so ridiculous, and they were defeated by memes, actually, I would suggest to you, and how memeable their ridiculous narrative was. So ridicule is an excellent weapon for us, actually. And, you know, some of their narratives are patently absurd and obviously constructed and fraudulent. And if we're well forearmed and aware and clear-sighted, then I think that gives us more opportunity to mock and ridicule their, frankly, evil plans for us. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Oh, actually, just one other thing. If you're interested in the corruption of the education system, which I've never been a great fan of at any stage, but it's patently worse than ever before, and these other social measures, you may or may not be aware of this group that operate out of London. I believe they have offices in other places as well, in the States and wherever. The Tavistock Institute. I believe their full name is the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations. I think that's their full title. They operate out of London and a few other centres. Yes, you may be aware of that group. If you're not, you may want to look into the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations. If you were to identify particular absurd and obscene initiatives happening in the social sphere, which I'm not going to identify right at this moment, but if there's some of those that you think are absurd and corrosive to people and children in particular, you might be interested to see that a lot of those narratives have originated with the Tavistock Institute. So if you're interested, by all means, look into that. Okay, thank you. That is all out of bubblegum for this week. That was the New Order of Barbarians, the New World System. I hunt it down. If you're interested, hunt it down. Ed, thank you so much. We will see you again for All Out of Bubblegum next week. Let those end credits roll, Ed. Thank you. Goodbye.